Hi everyone, and welcome to the 9th episode of Sales Leader Stories. I'm your host, Omar from Stacked. And today we've got another amazing episode coming up with Paddy, who's VP Sales at Metomic. On the episode today, we're going to be talking about how he helped build not one, but two unicorn sales teams at Intercom and Spendesk, transitioning to being a VP of Sales, advice he has for young sales reps, and a whole lot more. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Paddy, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much, Omar. Thanks for having me.
So Paddy, if you don't mind, I would love to go right back to the start and ask you how you got into sales in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, it's great to be a part of this. I'm really liking all of the things that you're doing at the moment. But yeah, let's go back a bit. This is where I love to tell people I was young and I dreamt of being in sales, but I don't think anyone really felt that way. Like, I'm sure the answer to this every single time you ask it is I fell into it.
Yeah.
So fell into sales, went to uni, college as we call it back in Ireland, graduated with a marketing degree, spent about 6-7 months in marketing, realized that I'd studied this thing for 4 years and I really just didn't like it. It just really wasn't for me. Didn't like the pace of it, didn't like that my role was so contingent on so many other things happening. You know, I was some part of the food chain where things went up my way, I approved them, or things went down my way to get approved. And I felt like I was kind of trapped a little bit. Now, that's not to say I had this great epiphany of getting into sales and kind of saw sales in this shining light. It's actually, I was thinking about this earlier. I remember even in college, there was a module on sales. So something you could do for 6 months or so. And I remember I didn't do it because in my head, I had this idea of sales, which I think a lot of people, I think probably it's built from one, really poor sales, but two, I think just the media perception of sales, the Wolf of Wall Street style. You either have it or you don't. It's kind of this gift of the gab type approach where you can talk your way into anything and so on and so forth. And certainly wasn't me. So I always thought the sales, that sounds like something I wish I could do, but I can't do it. Just like, I don't know, medicine or engineering or something like that.
Yeah.
But I was in roles in marketing, didn't like them. I saw a job advert that, to be honest, it was for a sales role, but it sounded nothing like what I thought sales was. So it was with a company who were relatively small. They just got a Series B at the time called Intercom, who have now gone on to do really, really great things. They were Irish founded, but they had really set up base, in particular on the commercial side, in San Francisco. And the VP of sales wanted to bring a team across from SF to Dublin and wanted to set up a kind of EMEA sales team. And for reasons unbeknownst to me, no idea, he decided that I was someone who should come on board that journey. So I started there as an SDR. We're talking almost 10 years ago now. So yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah. And obviously now Intercom are kind of a household name in B2B tech. You go on any landing page now and the little chat bot pops up. Could you speak to what it was like in the environment joining Intercom back then?
Yeah. It's a different time. I know it's 10 years ago. Like we're not talking a generation ago, but certainly in terms of technology, that's a fast thing to move. So back then, and I'm sure for listeners who have sold back then, but certainly people who haven't, this might be a bit interesting. Sales was a really dirty word. You had Atlassian were smashing it, who famously never had an in-house sales team. You had Slack, who were exploding, and it was all the precursor of product-led growth. No one really called it product-led growth at the time, but it was effectively build a great product, people will come, they'll naturally expand, and so on and so forth. And Intercom was in that mold as well. It was low barrier to entry, anyone could sign up, big hit in the startup community. It had such a broad reach, any company could benefit from talking to their customers. And it had grown like, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it was in the millions. It was in the strong like ARR millions from next to no sales team. A few folks in San Francisco who are managing maybe the slightly bigger ones that just needed a bit of massaging, a bit of kind of stakeholder alignment. But for the most part, the thing was selling itself. And it was there was no slight in the team there. Because at the end of the day, that product org and that engineering org, I still think are the best in the business. But certainly back then, they were absolutely machines and how quickly they were shipping such high quality product. Sales kind of felt like a second class citizen. Kind of felt like maybe in the engineering, the development team, they're kind of saying, scratching their head saying, are we doing that now? And it did take, I think probably took about a year and a half really to, I think, kind of bridge that gap where, both sides recognize the value of each other. I think, everyone at Intercom certainly recognized the value of the great product and engineering org. But I think for them to actually see that sales is adding an awful lot of value, not just on more revenue, et cetera, but, I think that the valuable insights, it's something people always forget. Like, your sales team are the only people in the company who speak to people who aren't customers, because otherwise you can very quickly find yourself in an echo chamber of, building all of these great things for your current customers. Don't get me wrong. That's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
But, what happens if you want to grow to new customers, new segments, bigger customers, smaller customers, anything like that? You may not have the product market fit that you thought you had because you built very, very specifically for your current customers. And I think that's where the value, from Intercom, I think they started seeing is like, hey, we're getting some insights in the field that we didn't have before. We're losing deals because of these things. We're not being able to talk to people because we don't have A, B, or C. And it just became a really interesting kind of roadmap item more than anything else. So I think that was the kind of, I suppose, the journey that Intercom went on. And I think, I name check Slack as well. I always thought it was funny. Slack, I think in 2014, 2015 said, we're never going to have a sales team. And I think by 2017 or 2018, they brought out a book, Slack on Sales. So like things changed pretty quickly. Similar with Intercom, we brought out a tool specifically built for sales teams. So I think as the market evolved, as this kind of idea of, the precursor of product-led growth would only get you so far, you had to bring in sales to go up market or to accelerate. I think you saw much more closer version to what you have today, where there isn't this, this kind of commercial teams elevated higher than R&D teams or vice versa. I'd like to think today, certainly in the best companies, it's a level playing field.
Okay, cool. So there was this kind of tipping point that it did kind of balance out. I think then Intercom obviously bursting at the seams growth. I think they raised a Series C round 2015, the first year you joined. And then I think it's Series D in 2018, they officially become a unicorn.
Yeah.
Can you tell me the just the hyper growth that you kind of experienced?
Yeah, it's interesting because even hypergrowth back then, like, Intercom, again, I'm thinking numbers wise, I think must have been close to 100 million ARR by the time they got to unicorn status. But we looked back in 2021, 22, there's companies at 3 or 4 million ARR getting to unicorn status. So like it was different in that sense. I think Intercom, it did grow an awful lot. I think I must have been just about in the first 100 employees there. I think I blinked by the time I left, it was about 750 or so.
Wow.
So it's not the absolutely crazy expansion growth that you had. Since then, the companies that are adding 1,500 people in the year. But it certainly did evolve. And the company, I think, evolved a couple of times, which is one of the things that I always say to people a lot. I'm a big proponent where possible of doing at least a kind of 4-year stint in companies, if you can. And I think that's not just for share options, in case anyone's thinking about that's the vesting schedule. It's an important thing, but it's also, I think, in a growing company, across 4 years, you're going to see it reinvent itself at least twice. You'll see the company that you join, and then typically pretty soon you'll start to see it'll morph into something else. It'll have to grow, it'll have to evolve, it'll open new products, it'll go new go-to-market motions or something like that, and it'll evolve. And most of these evolutions kind of run for about 2 to 2.5 years. And then you see it evolve again. And I think if we do 4 years, typically you're going to get 2 evolutions. So you're going to see the company that it was, then what it turned into, which you're going to be a big part of that because you're probably hired at some point around that term. And then you're going to have to deal with the change management as well when that kind of runs its course, and then it's time to evolve for a third time. So that to me, I think I certainly saw that at Intercom. I saw that a few years later at Spendesk as well. And I think it's the biggest learning you get. Like being in the company doing the same thing over and over and over again. It might be great stability, but the thing I used to always say to my teams is forget about embracing change. It should be about expecting change. Because for a company like, an Intercom or Spendesk or Slack or any of these great companies, they were built on this kind of dynamism that was driven by change, that they couldn't be stagnant for, if they're stagnant for 2 years' time, someone else is coming up behind them, will take their customers, their market share and everything else. So there's consistent kind of expectation of small changes every day, but every couple of years, you're going to see the company evolve into something else. And it's the best learning I think you can get in your career.
Okay, so it is the 4.5 year, maybe I think, stint that you do at Intercom. Obviously, like you say, they are evolving. I think you go from SDR to account exec to account manager during this period. Could you, maybe speak to your own personal journey in Intercom and what you learned in this period?
Yeah, absolutely. When I joined in Intercom, we're still very well, probably still today. Intercom was an inbound machine, so it was very heavily weighted on inbound, which is a great entry point to sales. You get used to talking to customers and so on and so forth. About a year in, started doing a bit more outbound, so we started focusing a little bit on scaling up the outbound. Did that for a few months before moving into an account executive role. So that was my kind of closing, for first taste of closing. First quarter, I was the worst account executive you've ever seen. I couldn't close a door. And then I kind of figured out, was working with Stan, who's the sales director there, since gone on to Lattice and a few other companies, I think. Stan was, he kind of said, mate, you got to figure this out. Like you can do it, I know, but like what's getting in the way? And I was overcomplicating it, and I think he said that. I was trying to run like a Sandler sales methodology on like a 500 quid a year deal kind of thing. So when I started to simplify it, I really found my feet, and I was able to, from there, kind of scale out how I was selling certain that like SMB space, which is kind of high velocity, super organized sales, running, 20, 30, 40 deal cycles at once. And doing them all at scale. We were able to scale that out then to the global team, which was, I kind of did a bit of a secondant on it, setting up, this kind of VSMB motion. That was awesome. It was great learning because, I think the thing that you learn the most, you want to learn how to close five deals, start by closing one. Like it's something with this momentum that you really get to learn things pretty quickly. So did that, then probably focus a little bit more on some of the mid-market stuff. So getting the bigger kind of 6-figure deals, which was looking to get a couple of them across line, which at the time were pretty big for Intercom. I'm sure they probably doing 7 figures deals pretty regularly now. But at the time, kind of 6-figure deals would be a bit of a showstopper. So I was lucky enough to work on a couple of them, which was a different beast altogether. It's the, your 6-month sales cycle with 25 stakeholders, and a procurement team that just wants to beat you down, and all the rest. So we did a lot of work there for about 6-9 months. And then following that, I think I was pretty vocal that my ambition was to get into leadership, into management. I enjoyed the coaching. I enjoyed the peer-to-peer coaching. I enjoyed kind of more of this kind of strategic view. Not just thinking about how I hit my target, but how can I make this consistent for myself and everyone else. Um, and probably could have just stayed in that closing role and waited for kind of management position to open up and hopefully apply for that. But there's an opportunity to then get into the existing business team. And I thought to myself, like, only good things could happen from learning what happens after the close. So I did that. I jumped into the existing business team, the account manager. Did that for a year. Again, very, very bad account manager for the first 6 months or so. But by the time I finished up, I think I'd gotten the hang of it, knew how to really work with a customer to make them successful and ergo grow the account and so on and so forth. So I did that for a year and then decided to make the move to Spendesk.
Okay, cool. And was it just that, I don't know, the opportunity came up at Spendesk? Was it that you were just looking for another challenge, or how did this happen?
Yeah, it was probably a combination of things. Certainly, I was really wanting to push myself in towards the leadership position. Intercom, there was always opportunities there. But probably none that was really grabbing me. I think probably get into like SDR management and that type of thing, which again is a tough old role, great place to start in leadership. But I really wanted to test myself, especially, how I can leave people closing deals. So into more kind of sales management. So that was on one side, maybe just the right opportunity did exist at Intercom. Second thing was I was based in Dublin, born and raised in Dublin, but a great city, best city in the world, but it's a small city. So I wanted to see the world a bit. So started thinking about what exists around Europe. And then thirdly, it was just, right time, right place. It was actually Stan, who was my sales director, knew of a company called Spendesk. Stan knew that I was getting a bit itchy feet. And he was very fair to me. He said, listen, I know this opportunity exists. Nicola Marche, who was the VP of sales at the time, was going to be in town. He was in town in Dublin for a conference. Grab a coffee with him, see what you think. But, Stan is very much a guy back to these guys. I think they're on a good journey. So yeah, I think all three of those things kind of came at the same time, and the rest is history, as to say.
Okay, cool. So you do your Spendesk, this French startup, fast growing. You are also transitioning from IC to leadership. Can you, speak to what this transition was like for you?
Yeah, it was a tricky one, certainly tricky because also coincided I moved to Paris again. We actually didn't have a UK entity, our UK business set up when I joined. So that was kind of my first job, was actually getting all things registered, pretending like I knew what I was doing. And then also coincided a couple months later with COVID. So it was, 2020 was an intense year to put it lightly. The transition leadership, kind of from IC to leadership it's a tricky one. I don't think there's any magic sauce for it. I think certainly in your first couple of months, you'll feel lost. A lot you'll feel this kind of impending doom of having no control. And you're looking at the numbers, they only seem to be going up, and performance only seems to be like, really trailing behind us. So yeah, like I don't think there's much that can kind of prepare you for leadership, other than just realizing everyone's go through it. As I always say to people, everyone has that moment where it just feels like, why have I made this mistake? I could be sitting on a great territory, nice and perched there, and not having to really care about anyone else but myself. Not to say that's the case, but like deep down your mindset is an IC. You don't need to care about the morale of other people. You don't need to care about if, one of the people is failing behind and they might have to go on a performance plan. You don't have to care about, how you align what your team are doing with the strategy of the company in the next 3 to 6 months. All of these things, they just don't factor into your head. So you get this moment where you ask yourself, why have I done this? And the only piece of advice I'd always have is get a pen and paper and write it all down. Above all else, you gotta find a way to kind of mentally vent and say, right, these are all of the things that are going wrong or I don't know about, or, be so exhaustive. on that. And once you have things written down, I've always found you just start to figure things out. Even like sales management, commercial leadership, whatever. They're difficult jobs, don't get me wrong, but like they're not building rockets, so they're not saving lives. Like, get it down on paper. You've been smart enough to get into the role in the first place. You were smart enough to figure out, these 25 different competing priorities.
Interesting. So it's not only that you are transitioning to leadership, I think then you are tasked with basically opening up the UKI market. I think you grow the commercial team from maybe 4 to 60 people. Could you, speak to what the task was like?
Yeah, it was tough. So we joined in January 2020. Obviously, we spent the first few months in Paris as we kind of got things set up in the UK. Now, there was, we had a bit of a foothold in the UK, nothing crazy. It was probably high six figures, just based on historical deals. One. But I suppose what we needed to do is how do we really explode from there. So we had an initial team that were based out in Paris, and we hired in a few more people pretty quickly. We COVID, which did kind of put everything on hold. And, there was a few months there where you're kind of scratching your head saying, is the world ever going to be the same again? Like, especially, company like Spendesk was selling corporate credit cards, and we always laughed that before the pandemic, basically what we were selling is cards for traveling.
Yeah.
So when your team were going abroad, you give them a Spendesk card, and that was effectively the product. And overnight that changed to how you manage online spend, and probably changed for the better into something a little bit more complex, a little bit more difficult to actually manage. So it was one of these things that, although we saw a lull in March, April, May, probably, we started to see really, really quick rebound kind of June onwards, and ended up having a strong end to 2020. Started to see really good customer retention, customer growth, and acquisition was picking up pretty strongly. At which point we decided, kind of back into pretty strong hiring. It was 2, 3, 4 people per month, pretty much consistently for about 6 to 9 months, kind of to midpoint 2021. At which point my role then started to change to not just look after, I suppose, the sales team, so SDRs, AEs, and so on, changed into more of a general management role. So that was looking at operations and partnerships and customer success, of course. And when we kind of amalgamated those teams, we grew out those teams a little bit more. I think at the high point, probably reached a little bit above 60 employees, which again is, going back to that thing I was saying about companies reinventing itself. That was not the same company of, versus the 4 sales reps that were there when I started. It was night and day. How we operated was different. And everything else about it was a much different, like unrecognizable to that company that I first joined.
Okay. And could you speak to that kind of transition that you all went through? So now you are responsible for hiring, training, managing both across, I imagine, like SDRs, account execs, CSMs, maybe first line managers. Basically, what went into this?
Yeah, by the end of it, it was kind of second line. I was directly managing kind of second line managers, who then had their first line managers in place, which, although it was really interesting, it was a different muscle. It was probably me personally. I probably started to, probably around the time where I started thinking, what is my next play here? I started to miss that a little bit because it's a much different role. Like what you're thinking about, your line of sight changes. As I always say, if you're an individual contributor, your line of sight is this month. Now, how am I going to hit target this month? If you're a manager, first time manager is probably this quarter. You're a good first time manager, probably have one eye on next quarter as well. Second line manager, you're probably thinking, at the very most the next 6 months, how do I have the right capacity in the team and so on and so forth. But my role ends up being, how do we make sure this continues to grow at 60, 70, 80, 90% per year for the next 5 years? Which, that's the more ultra strategic stuff, but I think I lost a little bit of, getting involved in deals, running kind of sales training, kind of sales coaching, stand-ups and all of these things that I used to love.
Mm.
I kind of lost all of that out of the role, which again is something you got to prepare yourself for. The role is completely different. As a first-time manager, as I always say to people, your job is effectively one job only. It's coach your team. Like, if you do nothing else, coach your team, increase their capabilities. It'll solve 95% of your problems. People will be more engaged. You'll get higher team retention. They'll be better at their jobs. So you'll get higher performance. People will want to get onto your team, so you'll be better to recruit. Like, coaching, being a coaching machine is a cheat code for a first-time manager. As you go up to second-line manager, you got to start thinking about the organization as a whole. So if you have a couple of first-time managers underneath you, how is the organization itself operating? Is it that efficient? Is there things that we can do to, big bets that we can put in place that will, transform the way we operate and so on and so forth. And then above that, it's longer term. It's where do we need to position ourselves in the market? Where is the market going to that we need to be? What's the alignment with marketing? What's the alignment with product and so on and so forth? So they're very, very different roles. But, as I said, I think coaching is important at all roles. But certainly if you're a first-time manager, if you do nothing else and you just really, really focus on coaching, you're going to do really well.
Amazing. And I think then Spendesk go on a pretty similar story as was at Intercom. I think in 2022, they raised a Series C to make them officially become another unicorn. So you've got 2 under your belt at this point, which is pretty crazy. Again, you do a similar stint, I think above 3 years. When did the time come? I mean, was it that you kind of felt you'd got up to such a senior leadership position that you were kind of detached from the actual mechanism? Or when was the point that you felt like you were again ready to move on?
Yeah, I think to an extent. So again, I was very honest. It's one piece of advice I'd always have for people. If you're thinking about leaving, tell your manager. Now, I don't know, that might sound a bit scary, but like, if they are the manager that will react badly, decision made, get out as soon as possible. But if they are a good manager, they'll say, we trust you. Please keep committed as long as you're here. If there's interesting opportunities, I'm happy to introduce you to people and so on and so forth. That's a standard and a great manager should have. And so I did, probably at about 3.5 years, I kind of mentioned that to Joe Smith, who's the CRO, my boss at Spendesk, and Joe, standard, 4 years earlier, kind of said, right, make sure it's the right decision for you. If you need any help, please let me know. So the reason probably was the role was a little bit too strategic versus tactical, which, it's something I'd love to revisit later on in my career. But I still didn't think I'd kind of close the book on, what a really, really consistently high performing sales team, a really great kind of sales team culture of coaching, development, and so on and so forth. I think we made great strides at Spendesk, but I always felt, looking back, there's too many things that I would have done differently if I was doing it again. That I kind of wanted to give myself one more crack at that journey, because it's a great journey. Like I can say it from being lucky enough to go on 2 of them thus far. It's an addictive journey, but I also, having done it a couple of times, it's not something you want to do for your whole life. I think it is energy draining and so on and so forth. So for me, I wanted to give myself one more kind of crack at that kind of real building journey before I start thinking about, that bigger, more strategic, bigger pay. So that's probably what the main driver behind the Spendesk decision. And then back to the company reinvents itself. I'd seen the evolutions. I've seen the growth, probably faster at Spendesk than the Intercom, just because it was a different time where businesses grew faster, where they hired more, they were more dynamic, just because it was the free capital that was on the market, just allowed people to really fundraise pretty easily. So things moved a hell of a lot quicker, in 2020 to 2024 versus 2015 to 2020, like completely different markets in terms of how fast companies could move, all based on just this access to capital that everyone had. So I'd seen the Spendesk evolutions a couple of times. I'd learned through them. I'd done things well, done things I think I could have improved on, and decided to give it another shot then.
Okay, cool. So from that point onwards, you transitioned to being a VP sales. Was VP sales always a title, a role that you were aiming for?
Um, I don't think so. Like, as I'm sure the team at Spendesk will tell you, even the Ford customer success team is Paddy the sales guy through and through. As much as I really appreciate one at Spendesk with a cracking customer success team, but I really appreciated the value of growing your customer base, high retention, and so on and so forth. No matter how much I tried, I would always gravitate towards sales. And therefore, probably the next step up for me would be kind of taking on that kind of global sales leadership position. So it was probably to me, it probably felt like the best next step.
Okay. And in terms of what that next step was, in terms of how you changed the leader, maybe additional responsibilities that you had to take on, what did this look like?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. When you kind of become the sales leader on the ground at the end of the day, like you're responsible for the number. As much as as well at Spendesk, for instance, I was responsible for the UK number, but at the end of the day, the buck stopped with my boss. He was the one who had to go in the firing squad of a board meeting, every quarter and kind of say the numbers are behind or above or whatever. I think it's a big gap in people's development. It was just certainly something that I would have loved to try to get more development on. I'm now kind of doing it by learning, but it's kind of working with boards and being that person has to report almost to the board as well as, the rest of the business and so on and so forth. So that's probably one of the bigger changes that, at the end of the day, yes, you're responsible. You're reporting directly to a CEO, which is different. CEOs, although they can coach you to an extent, they have way too many priorities to really think about your own development plan, for instance. That's for you to figure out with your employees or your direct reports. And whereas, with CEO, it's more of a different relationship where you're thinking about, you're not precisely reporting what you're doing. It's not that. It's about having discussion on topics that can really move the dial for the business, as opposed to saying, I've been an issue on team retention, or I'm a little bit worried about this person or that person. The CEO does not leave that on their plate. You're there to solve those problems. The CEO's there, and your meetings with the CEO should be about, I've noticed these 3 trends. My plan is to go here, here, and here. Let's discuss this and see if we can get additional resources from the rest of the business to follow this plan. So it's a much more different way of being managed or managing up versus, even, when you have someone, I suppose, between you and that CEO position.
And as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Metomic, where you are now, I think it's like a 50-person startup, obviously much smaller than your past experiences. I imagine less budget available, less headcount, all these kind of things. Could you speak to the additional challenges that you're now kind of facing?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit behind where I've joined before. Typically I was always looking at more of that Series B space, but with Metomic, I think it's well funded. The team have done a great job to this point. We've gotten some great funding from Evolution Partners, who are really, really top notch VC when it comes to all things cybersecurity. Certainly at this earlier stage, I think probably the big challenge, the big change is more so it's more external than these kind of internal things that I wish I had this tool or whatever. Actually become a firm believer now that you should only have 4 or 5 sales tools in your arsenal and choose wisely, as opposed to the kind of plethora of 25 tools that just end up slowing down your CRM. But it's more, the external thing is you're still looking for that level of market signal that you're on the right track. We're still in the kind of early Series A journey, that it's not like you have 700 or 1,000 customers or you have 10 million of revenue that's really showing you exactly where the market, where the market's going and whether or not you have the right message to capture that market. So it still is kind of trial and error a little bit. So that to me is the really interesting piece. It's very, very close to customers and very close to every deal. Because you're looking for signals. You're looking to understand, are the things that we're building the right things? Is the things that we're not building that we should be building? Is the messaging that we're going to market with resonating? Is there something else that we should be doing? So it's really, really interesting that you'd always somehow think that as a company grows, you're going to be more kind of, have more time to look externally at the market and so on and so forth. But it's actually the complete opposite. When companies are small, like your eyes are everywhere because you need that. You don't have the signal. However, when companies are big, you have an internal data team that are producing reports to tell you what you want to know. Therefore, everything becomes looking internally at a process and so on and so forth. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic. And I think probably, and that this is what I'm really excited for the journey with Metomic is, as we grow, how do we keep that small company mindset? How do we not have all the internal bullshit, to be honest, of, meeting for meeting's sake and process upon process and process? How do we continue operating when we're, 40, 50 people, but doing that when, we're 400 or 500 people? That to me is certainly something I'm really excited by. I know Rich, our CEO, is very, very aligned in this as well. So really as we scale, I think we want to keep that. And maybe that might mean we won't scale, certainly from a headcount point, as fast as companies used to, which I think is going to be the norm anyway. I've done the hiring 30 or 40 people in a year. It's very difficult to get right. And it's very difficult to get that right without sacrificing, for instance, how close you are to customers, how close you are to the market, and so on and so forth, because you have to start looking internal to do that. So that's probably the main change, really. From a resource standpoint, I think the market itself is very different than it was, in those Spendesk days. I think every company, no matter what the size, is now figuring out how to do a lot more with a lot less. So I don't feel like that's a huge challenge now. I think more so it's just making sure that we get as much signal from the market as possible, so that we can use that to really grow. That to me, I think, is the big challenge. And as a VP of sales or whoever you are in a company this size, it's not good enough to manage by spreadsheet. You have to be in the deals. You have to be, working with the team. You have to be going through like SDR accounts. You got to be so in the business, at this point, because if not, like, you're just not going to get the right amount of insight to know what the business needs to look like in 2 or 3 years.
Okay. Obviously a super exciting time to be joining the company. At this point in your career, you do already have 2 unicorns under your belt, as it were. Would it be fair to say the ambition is the same for Metomic?
I think, trust me, ambition, as I always say, is a unicorn or bust to people. The ambition of Metomic is huge. It's one of the things that I always look at when, in terms of that, I have assessed new opportunities, is what's the ambition of the founders? What is the ambition of, what's the space allow the ambition to be? For instance, it's all well and good being, a super ambitious company that is selling ball bearings or something like that. But like, the space probably isn't going to allow you to grow 10x year on year, and so on. Certainly in Metomic, it's a very exciting space. Data security, it's very much in vogue at the moment. I think people are using more and more data than they ever have, and there's more and more breaches than there ever has been. So it's a very exciting space at the moment. And our ambition certainly is to grow fast. but I think it's to grow in the right way. So it's not just growth at all costs, acquire whatever customers you want. We're probably, I'd say, the strictest qualifiers out of any software company I've ever seen anyway. You really have to fight to get into our pipelines, just because we want to make sure that we're working with people who actually get real clear value from the product. We don't want to just turn on a tap and get a bunch of customers that might stay for a year, have big fights or renewals and so on. We want to really make sure that we're qualifying customers in that will stay with us, will give us the feedback, we can really partner with it as time goes by. So that's really where the ambition is coming from at the moment, is how do we get as many great customers as possible? And if that means losing a hell of a lot of other ones, we'll do so. If that means qualifying out, 50% of our inbound leads, we'll do it, because we know that that's the type of company we want to build.
No, good to hear it. Okay, cool. Zooming out maybe a bit on the overall trajectory of your career, could you potentially, and we kind of discussed it a bit earlier in terms of the coaching culture that you built, but could you speak to the role that mentorship coaching had on your career development, both maybe as the early rep being mentored and then now as the leader figure?
Yeah, absolutely. The first, I always think like mentorship is more of a mindset than like an action. I think you have to be in a mindset to be mentored. And I suppose when I actually think about my career, and I was having to think about this earlier, most of the mentorship I've had is probably more informal. Like there certainly has been a lot of formal stuff, but probably the stuff that really sticks with me is the informal stuff. And even as a leader, but as an IC as well, I call it 360 mentorship. That you look all around you and you can learn, you can observe, you can ask for feedback, and so on and so forth. So when I say 360, that's above, so direct from your boss. It is your peers, so other managers, other leaders, and it's, I hate the term, but below, so your ICs, the people who are reporting to you. I think if you have that kind of mindset that everyone can mentor me in some way, shape, or form, that's where I think you really start to learn and grow. Like I think about a lot of times, early days at Spendesk, where I probably learned more from my team than I did from my boss. Learned more because they were the ones pointing at the blind spots. The boss comes in once a week or every other day and will look at certain things, and the team are the ones who are pointing at the blind spots. And certainly I think, that kind of mindset of being able to sit there and listen to feedback, solicit the feedback, ask for it, and then action it is a really, really important thing when it comes to growth. Now, with mentorship, probably the more formal standpoint, I've been lucky enough that I think every leader I've worked with, I've taken something from. So, I think back to, early days at Intercom, Russ Howe, who was was the first VP of sales when I was there. Russ was always, and he really showed, how you get to sell sales to a company. How do you build your internal brand of sales inside this company? Which is awesome. Really getting to see that. And I hope I can continue to do that throughout my career. Stan, I remember, used to see how, and I used to talk an awful lot, and I still do actually talk kind of formally a bit to Stan, who I worked with for 3 years at Intercom. But, really showed me how you got it as a great leader. You got to make sure everyone feels like they own the company. Give them a piece they own. You're in charge of this. You're in charge of that. And, I saw that early on. I implemented an awful lot myself, and I saw the results are insane. I think back to the Spendesk days, I really, really appreciate some of the work I did with Nico Marche, who was the first VP I worked with there. Nico was all about planning. You got to have a plan. Always have a plan. The only time you'll ever feel lost is when you don't have a plan. And Nico was very, very meticulous and pretty demanding that you had to have a plan. If he went in and he didn't show him a plan, that was not a fun meeting. But certainly you learned that the right way. Joe Smith had done it numerous times before. He used to just tell me, and probably the most important thing that anyone sales needs to learn, is it's only software and it takes time. And it really, really, in those moments when I was thinking, why aren't we growing this fast? Why do we lose that deal? Why is this, nothing working? Just that simple reminder, it's only software and it will take time. If you're doing the right things, you do them long enough, it'll work. And, even up to today, Rich, who I'm working with now, the CEO of Metomic, really, really showed me like the clear importance of, one, understanding the product inside out, but two, how you be super customer focused, how you just be obsessed when it comes to customer. And there's probably, numerous other peers, leaders, etc. I've taken other bits from, but, I think when it comes to that informal mentorship, it's a mindset. And I think, it's a cheat code for your career. I never understood the people who don't ask for feedback, don't, take a bunch of notes and they're getting feedback, don't try and understand the feedback. People who shy away from asking for feedback. I just don't understand it. This is free. Take it.
Amazing advice. Last question before I let you go, Paddy. If you were to sit down with either a younger Paddy just starting out at Intercom or anyone just kind of starting out their career, what advice would you give them on how they can, build a career they can be proud of?
Yeah. The first thing is going to be probably the most cliched thing ever, but it's organization. But I'll talk to everyone about organization. Be organized. Again, you're in full control of how organized you are, but being organized is the foundation of everything. Use a calendar, get super tactical on this. Use a calendar, to-do list. Everything you got to do, make sure you're on time, make sure you're before time, make sure you take notes, make sure you follow all of these things. It always surprises me sometimes when people come in, even you hire people in, or, you work with some people and you realize they don't have those core skills. And their skills are going to be developed super quickly, but it's the first thing. Spend a lot of time on making sure you get yourself organized. It's a muscle you have for the rest of your career, and you'll be able to do a lot of other great things, knowing that you have the bedrock of organization beneath you. Second thing, I mentioned it there, but it's something I took from Nico a lot, was always have a plan. Especially in sales, you will find that you'll find the walls are kind of closing in, once a month, once a quarter. The only time when that becomes crippling is when you don't have a plan. You don't understand, okay, cool. I'm at 10% of my target. I have 2 months left. What am I going to do? Get into detail. Well, I have these 5 deals. I can prospect these 10 accounts. I need to do this action, this action, this action, this action. And that is a route to getting there. It's not about having a dream, because dreams are unrealistic. It's about having a plan, which is a realistic dream. And you always have to have that plan. If you don't, the walls will close in on you and you'll crumble. Third thing, again, I think I mentioned a bit, but ask for help. These things are hard, they're difficult. There's a reason why there's fantastic earning potential in sales, because it's hard. It wouldn't make sense if sales was the easiest role in the world and you can make incredible amounts of money in it. It just doesn't make sense. It's hard. And then I think the last thing, it's just stretch yourself. I used to always talk about this, getting into that kind of stretch zone where, you're feeling pressure. You're really, really struggling to an extent, but you're starting to figure out things as you go. You only learn there. Get out of the comfort zone. Don't get into that panic zone where you're completely out of your depth, but find that zone where you're stretching yourself. You have to learn every single day. It's something that might be a slight toxic thought to an extent, but someone would tell me, if it's sales and you don't feel like quitting once a month, you're not doing it right. Not advocating for that, but that's the level of stretch, to kind of put yourself on that scale. It's how much am I stretching myself? How much is this kind of stressing me to an extent, but good stress that I know there's more to figure out. That'd be the things I'd focus on, get organized, have a plan, ask for help, and just really, really push yourself.
Amazing advice, Paddy. We will end on that note. If anyone after listening to this wants to reach out, is LinkedIn a good way to get in touch?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn's the best.
Amazing. Really appreciate your time, Paddy. And yeah, we'll speak again soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Omar.